Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, friends. Come on in. Come get warm. Come to the front. Come find a Siddur, which is a prayer book. There are prayer books that are back by the bookshelf where you're congregating right now, and there are also prayer books here on the pews. The prayer books say Mishkan Tefillah on them. If you have a book that says Mishkan Tefillah by you, would you raise it up high like Rabbi Mourners is doing now? The book has to say Mishkan Tefillah. It might say the Torah, that's a good book, but that's not what you need right now. It might say ABC, which is also a good book, and you're welcome to keep reading that if you want. There's some famous stories about reading such books in the synagogue. But the book that we all need to make sure we have right now, if we can read, is Mishkan Tefillah, which looks like this. And if you don't have a book like that, please raise your empty hand, and Mary Beth, our wonderful Director of Member Services, will make sure that you get a prayer book if you need one. Just raise your empty hand if you don't see one where you're sitting. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom. Let's sing together. Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom. These Siddurim, these prayer books, open from right to left. We open them now to page 192. Page 192. You might have two sets of numbers in the lower right. We'll be calling out numbers in brackets if you must choose. So look carefully for the number in brackets. That's page 192. And on that page, you should see the words Ma Tohu. Ma Tohu. Ma Tohu. Ma Tohu. Ma Tohu. Ma Tohu Alecha Mishkelotecha Yisrael, Ma Tohu, Ma Tohu, Ma Tohu, Ma Tohu, Ma Tohu. Again, 192 in brackets. Ani berochastecha avo beitecha eshtacha vel heichal kodshecha beiratecha Ma tohu, Ma tohu, Ma tohu. Four more times. Ma tohu, Ma tohu, Ma tohu, Ma tohu. Near the middle of 192. Vani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon Elohim merov chasdecha haneni behemet yishecha Ma tohu, Ma tohu, Shabbat Shalom.
So it's so good to be gathered with you this morning. We know that to get into this room, there were a lot of hoops to jump through, and we're so glad you made the effort to be here. It's not easy to make any kind of gathering happen during this time. And it's been so long since we've been able to just gather without any kind of worries or special measures. But we're still here, and we're together, and that matters. And if you're here with us on Zoom, we're so glad you woke up this morning and turned on your computer to be with us so that we could connect with you even across the distance. We are glad to be together this morning and want to make sure that everybody knows, I think you do, that you got to keep your mask over your nose and mouth the whole time that you're here. We're going to keep each other safe as much as we can. If you ever feel like you need more space, there's so much of it. You can use any part of the space. You can go and give yourself some distance or space if you want that. And what we're doing together, and the reason it matters that we're here in one way or another, is we're celebrating this day that our people hold precious. And it's the idea that every 7 days, people need rest. That our world moves too quickly and it demands so much of us, and it's exhausting our lives, what we have to do in the world. Whether that's school and homework, or whether that's work, or whether that's errands and to-do lists and running and rushing and parenting and responding to emails and texts and buzzing things and beeping things and all the things that have to happen in a day, it's a lot. So one thing is if you've got a thing that buzzes or beeps or vibrates or tells you that somebody's trying to get in touch with you, this is a great time to turn that thing off. And turning that thing off is kind of symbolic because we're turning it all off right now. We're turning off all the outside noises, all the things that are pulling on our attention all the time, trying to get us to do more. This day is about turning all that off. This day is about coming into a space that we call a sanctuary and making it really a sanctuary in time, which we mark off from the other days. We make it separate, we make it special. And we do that because we need it. Our bodies need it. Take a deep breath into your body this morning. Notice that you even have a body this morning. Our souls need it. We have to remember that we're more than the work of the world. That yes, the work of the world is important. And 6 days a week, we do that work. And this weekend is Martin Luther King weekend, and we think especially this weekend. Also, it is today's Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat in which we cross the seat of freedom. We think especially on this Shabbat about the unfinished work of the world, about the work that's necessary in the world to make the world what it should be. Yes, we'll talk more about that. But Shabbat is a day in which we also take a bit of a vacation from all the troubles of the world. We remind ourselves that we're more than that there's marvelous things about the simple experience of being alive, that being alive is wondrous, just in its simplicity, just that we can see, we can breathe, we can sing, we can love. That's amazing. And so this morning we're trying to remember the bigger things, bigger than all the work of the world, the transcendent things. And so as we pray together, we're going to be using the name of God and the word. We're going to be talking about God a lot in our prayers. And maybe you're somebody who doesn't usually do that, and it's maybe not a category or an idea that you know how to connect to, or maybe you really actively don't want to connect to an idea of God. You are still welcome here, and you are welcome to join us in every prayer that we pray. And by the way, the prayers are going to be mostly on any page spread. They're mostly going to be on the right side, and they're going to be mostly in Hebrew. And if you don't read Hebrew, that's okay, because right next to them is the transliteration. Every single thing is spelled out in English letters. You can join with every word if you want to, and we welcome you to do that. And then below that, there's a translation so you can see what we're saying. On the opposite page, there's poetry to help you find your way in, because we don't want you to actually wrestle with or fight with or struggle with any idea of God that you find here, if that's something that you would be doing. We want you instead to find a way into the idea. There is something bigger than us, something bigger than you, right? Whether that's the cosmos, or the span of time, or the ecosystem, or love, or life itself. That we are small, and it is big, and it is wondrous, and it is wow. And that is the spirit of what we're getting into this morning, is remembering awe, remembering wonder, remembering majesty. So don't spend any time arguing with anything you find here. If you don't like it, pick another thing. There's lots of things to connect to. But use this time to connect and to remember what's really going on here, beyond all of the to-do lists and all of the buzzing and the beeping, and all the rushing and the running. That's what we're doing together this morning. So we're going to go to page 194, kind of, because there's a prayer there that's about gratitude for our bodies and our souls, and just like being alive. And the thing is, we're kind of going to that page because there's a Hebrew line right there at the bottom of that prayer that we're going to pray, but also there's a bunch of English we're going to pray that's not on that page. So Cantor Brace is going to sing it, and we're just going to join with him and take it in, and then pray that Hebrew line, and then from there we're going to go into the miracles of every day, which just are about waking up, and the simple, ordinary miracles of every single day of just being alive. And then we're going to go from there into Psalm 150, which is just basically hallelujah. Everybody knows that word. If you don't know the other words, if you can't sing the other words, it doesn't matter, because you can totally sing hallelujah, which is, as you know, just basically means wow, thank you. Wow, thank you. Amazing. That's what we're doing.
I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. I'm perfect the way I am, and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. I thank you for my life, body and soul. Help me realize I'm beautiful and whole. Help me realize I am beautiful and whole. I'm perfect the way I am and a little broken too. I'm perfect the way I am and a little broken too. I will live each day as a gift I give to you. I will live each day as a gift I give to you, my God, my God. Oh, sing it a little higher. Oh, and even higher. Oh, the middle of 194. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh kol basar u'mafli la'asot. Baruch atah Adonai, rofeh kol basar u'mafli la'asot. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan masech v'bina להבחין בין יום ובין לילה. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, פוקח עברים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, מתיר אסורים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, זוקף כפופים. 200. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, רוקע הארץ על המים. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamechlin mitzadei gaber. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish haromim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanoten laya et koach. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Hamavir sheina meinai u'tnuma me'af apai. 202. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani b'tselem Elohim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani ben chorin. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asani Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. I invite you to get a bit more comfortable, stretch out, take some more space. See if you can relax into this moment. You're here, you've made it, it's warm. You can tap your foot if you want to. 218, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 bekodesho, hallelujah, bekiyahuzo, hallelujah, bigavurota, hallelujah, kerokedo, hallelujah. Sing it with us. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Beteka shofar, hallelujah, b'neva v'chinot, hallelujah, b'tochu b'chol, hallelujah, b'minim be'ugah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. B'tzilzel shama, hallelujah, b'tzilzel etruach, kol ha'neshama tehallelujah, kol ha'neshama tehallelujah, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Hello, hello, Shabbat Shalom. This is exactly what we're about to do, isn't it?
Totally.
Yes,
Yes,
how about
that's
that?
what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so taking that energy of that Psalm 150 and turning it into friendliness, we're going to take a moment to do what Canterbury just did, which is turn to each other and make this a really friendly place. So you can get up out of your seats for a minute and just greet each other. And if you're on Zoom, you'll get a minute to turn on your camera and turn toward each other and wish each other a Shabbat Shalom, and then go to a breakout room. So take a minute here in the room, get up out of your seats, wish each other a Shabbat Shalom. All right, thank you for being so friendly. You can return to your seats now.
We invite you all to remain standing while you return to your seats and turn to page 224 for Chatzi Kaddish.
Yes, we're returning to our seats. We're standing, we're turning to the prayers. We're stopping, greeting each other, even though we're so happy to see each other. So glad to be together. We're going to go back to our seats now. We're going to go back to our seats now. All right, we're turning to our seats. Excellent. We're standing. We're on 224. Chatzi Kaddish.
Shirah, Please be seated. 228. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzei or uborei choshech Oseh shalom uborei et hakol. Try it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzei or uborei choshech Oseh shalom uborei et hakol. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzei or uborei choshech Oseh shalom uborei et hakol.
This prayer that we're praying on page 228, Yotzer Or, it is a prayer in gratitude for the natural world, for all the growing things. It's about light, but it's also about everything that grows in light. And this weekend, not only is it Shabbat Shirah, the Shabbat of Song, when we cross the sea to freedom, not only is it Martin Luther King weekend, but also Monday is also Tu B'Shvat, the holiday, the new year of trees for the Jewish people. We celebrate trees, we plant trees, and we have come across a beautiful set of prayers that were found in the Cairo Geniza, which was a place where kind of a treasure trove of Jewish texts found by Solomon Schechter in 1896. But it's from a synagogue in Cairo that was built in 882. And it's thought that found there was this set of prayers about Tu B'Shvat. Beautiful prayers. And they're meant to be for a weekday Amidaf on Tu B'Shvat, but I've taken verses from it and brought it together for this Yotzer Or prayer this particular morning. We think this was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi ben Rabbi Hillel, who lived in the 10th or 11th century. Awesome rains of salvation sent down upon my people, as the walnut tree blossoms for my beloved ones. On the new year of the trees, awaken the strength of my people. Brightly will the cypress shine on the new year of the trees. Bless with the rains of revival the land of the living. The chestnut tree rises to its height. Let the myrtle flower on the new year of the trees. May the rose sparkle and never fade. On the new year of the trees, brightness will shine in Jacob's country. There the leafy olive rules. The carob will make sweet its blessing to praise you on the new year of the trees. May the weight of justice tip our scales. Let blossoms multiply for our delight. Produce of orchards and of the land, with the fruit of the trees, we will be blessed. Gourd and pomegranate will blossom for this people on the new year of the trees. May sycamore and wild fig grow tall. Proclaim on the new year of the trees for peace. True peace I will give you in this place. Blessed are you, Adonai, the one who makes peace. We continue with Ahava Rabbah, page 230. Our prayer in gratitude for Torah, and a prayer that sees Torah as a gift of love. Today, Charlotte and Sophie are going to be receiving the gift of Torah. They are going to be taking Torah into their arms. They will be carrying Torah for our people, taking upon themselves the role and responsibility of all Jews to keep Torah alive in our generations and pass it to the generations who follow us. That is part of what we're doing today, this morning. They're receiving Torah, and they'll be reading it, and they'll be teaching it. And we see all of this passing of learning, of wisdom from generation to generation as part of God's love for us. And we sing together on page 230 about that love.
שבטחו בך בעבור אמותינו, ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו, תלמדנו, עד רחם עלינו, ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמוע ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך near the bottom of 230. לשמך הגדול סלע, באמת להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. 232. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. שמע ישראל ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. 234. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבבך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם במזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם. 240 words from this week's Torah portion, one of the oldest melodies we have for Micha Mocha. Micha Mocha Ba'elim Adonai, Micha Mocha Nedar B'Kodesh, Nora Tehilot, Osefele Shirah Hadasha, Shibechu Geulim, Leshimecha L'Sefat Hayam, Yachad Kulam Hodu V'Himlichu Ve'ameru, Adonai Imloch Le'olam Va'ed. We rise if we're able. Sur Yisrael, Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael, Ufedechi Me'umecha Yehuda Be'Yisrael. Go Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Ata Adonai Gai Yisrael.
We come next on page 242 to our tefillah, our amidah, our standing central prayer of our prayer service. And the first major prayer of this section on page 244 is about the generations. It's about seeing ourselves in the line of our ancestors and introducing ourselves really to God in the line of our ancestors. And on this Shabbat, as I said, as we're passing Torah to a next generation, we think about each of them in the context of those who came before, those who prayed these very prayers, those who didn't pray these prayers, but whose families joined with the Jewish people and became one with it. And as we come to these words, we think about ourselves passing Torah to this generation and all the generations that will come, who will say these very words just as we say them this morning.
Silently through page 261, using the words of these pages, the words of our hearts. When we finish, we may be seated. finished your prayer, you may be seated. Page 672. With a new year of trees on the horizon, and two young people taking their place as sowers, seeds of Torah, teachers in their own right, come these verses about planting, not just literal, but also metaphorical. Most precious thing we have, passing of our tradition, our sacred lessons. 672 in the middle.
Very subtle cantor. You may have noticed, if you were like really, you have to know some stuff and also have been really paying attention, that in the middle of that song about planting trees, he put in the melody for Eitz Chaim, talking about our Torah being like a tree of life. Perfect, not only in that moment, but also as a transition to what's going to be coming next, which is our Torah service. So, but before that, we have some greetings and announcements from Joanna Pressman on behalf of our Board of Trustees.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you all for being here in person and virtually today. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I want to welcome you and start with some thank yous. Thank you to our clergy, Rabbi Rachel Timoner and Cantor Josh Breitzer, for leading us today. Thank you also to our entire CBE staff, led by our Executive Director, Mark Flaxer. In particular, Mary Beth Bacha, who's here supporting services in person, and Ben Kern, our virtual usher managing the Zoom and the live stream. Thank you all for all you do every day. And of course, Mazel Tov to Charlotte Bieber and Sophie Hughes, who are becoming Benot Mitzvah today. I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning from you. Just one upcoming event that I want to announce, as has already been mentioned, Tu B'Shvat is coming up. And on Monday, January 17th at 7:30 p.m. on Zoom, you, and by you I really mean adults in our congregation, are invited to join Rabbi Matt Green for Mixed Up, a Tu B'Shvat Seder with fruits and nuts. This lighthearted and entertaining evening, as I said, is intended for adults to mark the holiday. To RSVP and receive the Zoom link, please check the CBE Weekly Advisory email or our website where you can find the calendar for that. And I think a link might also have been dropped in the chat on the Zoom. For information about everything that's happening at CBE, you can see our website, cbebk.org. And once again, thank you all for being here, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Joanna. All right, we are ready to take those Torah scrolls out of the ark and to begin our Torah service. So to make that happen, actually, before we do that, you didn't even have to. You were gonna make sure I got it right, but I'm just in the nick of time remembered what's happening next, which is before we take the Torahs out of the ark, Charlotte and Sophie need to receive their talitot, their special prayer shawls from members of their family. So Charlotte is going to receive hers from her grandmother, Judith Bieber, and Sophie is going to receive hers from her mother, Rachel Hughes. And they're going to all come up, and let me explain what they're doing as they're coming up. So this is a talit, or talis. It's a prayer shawl that Jews wear when we pray, especially in the mornings. And what's important about it is the fabric can be, you can see different colors, different fabrics, different patterns, but they all have this on the corners. The four corners, they have these tzitzit, which are ritual fringes that are wrapped in a very specific pattern and knotted in a very specific pattern that represents God and Torah. And so as Charlotte and Sophie place these talitot on their shoulders today, they are symbolically saying, yes, today is the culmination of so much preparation and work to be ready, but it's not the end of anything. It's the beginning of the rest of their lives living as Jews. So I want you to come where your Zoomers can see you, and you'll receive this from your parent, from your grandmother and your mother, and you'll say the blessing and put it over your shoulders. But you're also going to turn toward the next set of people. A lot of things. Let's see.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatef b'tzitzit.
Amen. You're staying here? All right, and now we are ready for Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service for the reading of Torah. And for that, we're going to need Charlotte's cousin Nicole Friedman, and Sophie's friends Anna Wells and Stella Kraka to come forward, and they're going to open the ark. And then for the Torah procession, when Sophie and Charlotte have the Torahs in their arms and they're going to be walking around the room, following them in the Hakafa are Charlotte's cousins, Ali Jacobs and Isabella Eisenberg, and Sophie's friends, the same friends who came to open the ark, Anna and Stella. We ask everyone to please rise. We're on page 362.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shema.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Shabbat Shalom. Well, as I mentioned earlier in the service, this is a big Torah portion for the Jewish people. Right in the middle of this Torah portion, we have the Song of the Sea, the moment when our people cross from slavery to freedom. The walls of water on our left and our right. It is a dramatic portion. It is probably the best known in Torah. It's up there. And we're going to be hearing it read this morning by members of our congregation, of our clergy. Charlotte's going to read. We're going to hear Sophie read. And we're going to invite members of Charlotte's family and members of Sophie's family up for the blessings that are chanted before and after the Torah is read. Chanted or read before and after the Torah is read. And so, if you want to follow along with this Torah portion, you're going to change books. You've been in a book called Mishkan Tefillah, which is the prayer book. You're going to change to the book that says the Torah on it. You'll find it, I hope, in your pews. And we're going to be on Exodus chapter 14, which is where we're starting. Exodus chapter 14, verse 21, which you can find on page 436. 436. And first, we're going to invite up Charlotte's great uncle, Richard Eisenberg, for the Aliyah. And our member, Joanna Pressman, is going to be chanting Torah. And I just want to say, as Joanna's coming up, we love it when our members chant Torah. It is awesome. We love it when our adult members chant Torah, when our teens chant Torah. We think it is a wonderful thing to have members of our congregation participating so actively in our services. So thank you, Joanna, for doing that. And Richard will come up for the Aliyah.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher b'cha bonu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Vayet Moshe et yado al hayam, vayolech Adonai et hayam, baruach kadim azah kol halayla, vayasem et hayam lecharava. Vayibakeu hamayim, vayavohu b'nei Yisrael b'toch hayam vayabasha, v'hamayim lahem homa miminam u'mismolam, vayirdefu Mitzrayim vayavohu achareihem kol sus para'o. Rikbo ufarashav el toch hayam, vayehi be'ashemoret haboker, vayashkev Adonai el machne Mitzrayim. Be'amud esh ve'anan ve'yahom et machne Mitzrayim.
Yeshikoah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natah b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Yeshikoah. So now we're going to invite Charlotte's parents, Sarah and Michael, to come forward for the next Aliyah, and Kinter Britzer will be chanting.
Yamdu Shabbat HaMitzvah Rishona L'Aliyah Torah. I'll be continuing from verse 25, Exodus 14:25.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Mevorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayasarei tofan markevotav, vaynahageu bichvedut. Vayomer Mitzrayim, anusa mipnei Yisrael, ki Adonai nilcham lahem b'Mitzrayim. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, netei et yadecha al hayam, vayashuvu hamayim al Mitzrayim, al richbo ve'al parashav. Vayet Moshe et yado al hayam, vayashov hayam, lifnot boker le'eitano, Mitzrayim nasim likrato, vayna'eh Adonai et Mitzrayim betoch hayam.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We now call forward Charlotte as a bat mitzvah by her Hebrew name. Tamod, 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 Habuchura bat mitzvah. Sarah, you can stay here. Sarah, you can stay here. Tamod, 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 Buchura bat mitzvah. Decham acharab Moshe v'Sara l'aliyah Torah. Chizki ve'imtzi.
Vayashuvu. Baruch hu et Adonai Hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayashuvu hamayim, ויחסו את הרחב ואת פרשים, והוא אל פרעה, הבאים אחריהם בים, לא נשאר בהם עד אחד. ובני ישראל הלכו ביבשה בתוך הים, והמים להם חומה מימינם ומשמאלם. ויוש אדוני ביום ההוא את ישראל מיד מצרים, וירא ישראל את מצרים מעל שפת הים. וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה אדוני במצרים, ויראו העם את אדוני,
ויאמינו באדוני ובמשה עבדו.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורה אמת וחיינו למדת בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן.
When
Yasher
someone
koach.
is in the Greek synagogue, you say Yasher koach. Charlotte. And we're ready now to hear Sophie chant Torah. She's going to chant it from Actually, we're going to pause for Shabbat Shirah. So, with our Eitz Chaim in our midst, our Torah, which is a tree of life to us, we take time in the middle of reading to think about people who need healing and strength, drawing on the strength of the Torah in our midst. We're going to be praying from our prayer books, Shabbat, page 371. And I invite you, if you are on Zoom, to write in on the chat any names of people you're thinking about who need healing. And if you're in the room, we'll take a moment between the verses for you to be able to say out loud anybody you're thinking about who needs healing that you're going to include in our prayers. Now we're going to invite Sophie to come up and chant Torah. And she's going to be reading from chapter 17, verse 1. And so if you are following along, you're going to go back to your Torah commentary now and turn to page 446. 446. chapter 17, verse 1. And we're going to be inviting members of Sophie's family up for the Aliyot, and starting with her parents, Rachel and Matt Hughes.
יעמדו ההורים שבת מצווה שני לעלייה לתורה. And her brothers.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayiseu kol adat b'nei Israel ממדבר סין למעשיהם על פי אדוני, ויחנו ברפידים ואין מים לשתותם. ויערב העם עם משה ויאמרו תנו לנו מים ונשתה. ויאמר להם משה מה תבואו עמדי, מה תנשאון את אדוני. ויצמא שם העם למים, וילן העם על משה, ויאמר למה זה העליתנו ממצרים, להמית אותי ואת בניי ואת מקני בת צמא.
Yeshikoah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam, natan v'tobeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
And now we're going to invite Sophie's grandparents, and they're here, yes? Or there's, yes, they're going to come forward. This is Boris Nedwood and Tamara Saxon.
יעמדו הסבים שבת המצווה לעלייה לתורה.
Baruch hu Adonai Hamborach.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach Olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. ויצעק משה אל אדוני לאמור, מה אעשה לעם הזה? עוד מעט ותקלוני. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, עבור לפני העם, ויקראתך מזקני ישראל, ומטהם אשר הכית בו את היאור, כך בידך והלכת. הנני עומד לפניך שם על הצור, בהובר והכית בצור, והיאור ויצאו ממנו מים ושתה העם, ויזקין משה לעיני זקני ישראל.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam natan b'yadeinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. We
Yeshikoah.
now call forward Sophie Zabat Mitzvah by her Hebrew name, and after I do that, she'll take the corner of her talit and touch what she'll continue before making the opening blessing. תעמוד, 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 בחורה בת המצווה השנית, סופיה ברכה מתתיהו, לעלייה לתורה, חזקי ואמצי. ברוך אדוני מבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני מבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayikra Hashem hamakom masah, umrifa aviv b'nei Israel. Ve'ala sotah et Adonai lemor, hayesh Adonai b'kerbenu im ayim. Vayavo Amalek vaylahem im Israel b'yechidim. Vayom Moshe el Yehoshua v'halanu anashim v'tzei lehem v'Amalek mahar Anochi nitzav al rosh hagiva
Mateha Elohim beyadi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'hiyeh olam natan b'dohinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Say Yashakah. Beautiful. It is time for us to lift our Torah. Yes, thank you. Beautiful. We're going to lift and dress our Torah now, and we invite Charlotte's cousin Allie Jacobs to come and dress the Torah, and Rabbi David Edelson, just recently, the father of Bar Mitzvah, coming up to lift our Torah. We ask everyone to please rise.
Page 370.
So on a Shabbat morning, we hear Torah chanted in the original, and then we hear the prophets interpreting Torah in their time. And we're going to be hearing this morning from the book of Judges, chapter 5, which you're going to find on page 464 in your Torah commentary. We're going to be first on page 464 and then on page 467. We're starting on verse 1 of chapter 5. What's going to happen is Sophie and Charlotte are going to chant the blessing before and after the passage from Judges, and then they're just going to chant the passage, and they're going to chant the closing blessing as well.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar b'nbi'im tovim be'ratzav v'divrayim hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'Torah u'b'Moshe avdo u'b'Yisrael amo u'b'nbi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. V'tasha devara u'varak ben Avinoah
ביום ההוא לאמור בפרעה פרעה בישראל בהינדב עם ברכו אדוני שמעו מלאכים האזינו רזני אנוכי לאדוני אנוכי אשיבה אזמר לאדוני אלוהי ישראל אדוני בצדך משעיר בצדך משדה אדום ארץ רעשה גם שמיים נטפו גם אבים נטפו מים אבים נזלו מפני אדוני זה סיני מבני אדוני אלוהי ישראל
Moshe tahatanena ahi tashiva moreha la Elohim sa'u yahaliku shalal rachatayim l'rosh geber shalal sab'im l'siv sirah shalal sab'im rikma severikmatayim l'tzavarei shalal kei Yobdu oivecha Adonai ve'ohava Ketzei hashemesh b'vorto Batishkot ha'aretz arba'im shana Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Tzor kol ha'olamim Tzadik b'chol hadorot Ha'el ha'ne'eman Ha'omer ve'oseh המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת בצדק על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לה ומברכים אותה יתברך שמך בפי כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Mitzvah, giving us their own teachings about how this parsha relates to us today. And here's what's really important, what's happening here is that you could easily look at the Torah and say, well, that was a really long time ago. It's an old story. What does it have to do with me? But what it is to make Torah alive is for every generation, upon receiving Torah, to look inside that text and say, I'm going to wrestle with this text and find what it has to say to me today, what it has to say to our generation, what it speaks, how it speaks to my heart. And so that is what Charlotte's going to do and then Sophie's going to do this morning. They're becoming our teachers as they become B'nai Mitzvah.
Do you remember when we felt like quarantine would never end? When it finally did end, we had no clue how to act. This relates to my parsha. In my parsha, after the Jews have been freed from slavery in Egypt, they weren't hopeful that they were going to succeed in freedom. They complained to Moses about being hungry and thirsty. At one point, they were reminiscing on the abundance of food that they had in Egypt. It seemed like they were willing to go back to their captivity to satisfy their appetite. When I read this, I asked, why did the people complain about the flesh pots of Egypt they left behind? Are they saying they're willing to go back to slavery because they had good food there? It is possible that the Israelites were looking back on their servitude in Egypt with rose-colored glasses. According to Rabbi Eliezer from the 2nd century, they began to look back upon their slave experience with nostalgia. They forgot about the beatings and humiliation. They remembered the abundance of food on their table. This is understandable considering the past year for students like me who have had to do school remotely. Now that we're back in person, we forget the miserable experience of online classes and just remember being able to stay home and wake up later. Nahama Leibowitz, who lived in the 20th century, has a similar theory. She wrote, "Scarcely redeemed from the toils of slavery, the unleavened dough of Egyptian flour still in their mouths, they saw their former country of adoption through rose-colored spectacles." In other words, Leibowitz is saying because they were so used to what was going on in Egypt that they didn't know how to act when they were free. This introduces another reason why they might have complained to Moses. They didn't know how to be free yet. Leibowitz adds, in Egypt, they were free of responsibility for their own destiny. The Israelites had lived most of their life without freedom. It must have been a rude awakening when they were finally free and had to make their own decisions. When we started doing school 5 days a week, it was a lot to get used to and very overwhelming. Just like the Israelites, I was upset. Another possible reason they were complaining was that they were afraid of the unknown. Leibowitz adds, Egypt was still the land of grave, but better to be buried in the graves of a familiar country than to die in the unknown. Egypt was a house of serfdom, but better to serve the Egyptians than to live in a strange clime. The Israelites had lived their whole life in Egypt and must have rather died there than in an unknown place. They had an attachment to this land, even though the people treated them so poorly, and it must have been scary for them to venture out someplace different. I again resonate with this, and that coming back to school in person was scary and overwhelming. I didn't know anything about what school would be like where we would be eating lunch, if there would be after-school activities or sports, if I knew anyone in my class. So what does this parsha mean today for us? Just like the Israelites adapted to their new life when they knew it would be better for them, even though they were scared, we need to adapt to a post-quarantine life. In my parsha, the Israelites were afraid of the unknown. And maybe you are feeling afraid right now too. Afraid of getting COVID, afraid of social interactions, afraid of going back to work or school in person. But I would encourage you to adjust to the best of your capabilities and whatever feels comfortable for you. Go at your own pace, but just don't take 40 years like the Israelites. They got through their struggles, and so will we. Shabbat Shalom. Let me turn this off.
Hello, Charlotte. And now we get to hear from Sophie.
In the book The Giver, the world starts out as black and white and is perceived to be perfect. My parsha, however, convinced me that there is no perfect and that there are no black and white situations. In my parsha, the Egyptians pursued the Israelites to the Red Sea, and Moses split the Red Sea. God hardened the Egyptians' hearts and made them pursue the Israelites. In the past, I've thought it as simply the Egyptians being right and the Egyptians being wrong, the Israelites being right and the Egyptians being wrong. But is it ever right to kill, even if it is done to protect the Israelites? Why did God want the Egyptians to pursue the Israelites? According to the tractate Megillah in the Talmud, which was written around the 5th century, in the moment when Egypt was destroyed at the sea, the heavenly angels wished to sing in rapture before the Holy One, blessed be He. But God said to them, my creatures, the Egyptians, are drowning in the sea, and you're going to pick this time to rejoice in front of me? God seems remorseful that the Egyptians died. God calls the Egyptian God's creatures and acknowledges that there was wrong in what they did, even if it was done to protect the Israelites. So does this make God's actions wrong or right? Ibn Ezra, who lived in Spain in the 12th century, saw this differently. He thought God's thoughts were this, and I will get me honor upon Pharaoh. My glory shall be manifest in the world when I drown Pharaoh and his army. In this interpretation, God only wants glory. In Tractate Megillah, God seems to feel sad that the Egyptians died, but thought it was a necessary sacrifice for the Israelites. Here, instead, God doesn't seem remorseful at all and has a different motive. God only wants glory. Ibn Ezra also had an interesting commentary in the next verse, which says, "The Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord," he said. And the Egyptians shall know refers to those who remain in Egypt and do not pursue Israel, and those who drown prior to their death shall know that I am the Lord. His interpretation of this verse is that God wants the Egyptians that are still in Egypt to know that God is God, and the people who are drowning to know that God is God. This feels different from the other source from Ibn Ezra. In his first source, God is only thinking about God's own glory, but in this one, God is thinking about spreading the religion to other people. In conclusion, what I learned from my parsha reminded me of what I learned from the giver, because you can never get absolutely perfect. In the giver, they took away color so everything would be more equal and nothing would look bad. In the end, it ended up not making the world perfect because the imperfections are what make the world real. In my parsha, there are two sides, the Egyptians and the Israelites. The Egyptians enslaved the Israelites, and that was wrong, so we see the Egyptians as completely wrong and the Israelites as completely right. But the Israelites were joyed after seeing the Egyptians die. Is it good to rejoice when the others die? God doesn't seem to think so. Even though the Egyptians enslaved the Israelites, that still doesn't make it right to kill them. Two wrongs don't make a right. And the next time you feel someone did you harm, remember they're a person too.
Yeshua, Sophie, Yeshua, Charlotte, you brought us two really interesting questions this morning. One was about the process of moving toward freedom or any kind of big transition and what emerges in us in a fear of the unknown. What happens to us when we're moving from the known to the unknown, whether that's walking across a seat of freedom or whether that's coming through a pandemic? What happens to us in that panic and fear of what's unknown? And then the idea of, even in the most dramatic story of enslavers and enslaved, of oppressors and oppressed, should we really see it as black and white? Are there really just good guys and bad guys? And even if we do think generally there are good guys and bad guys sometimes, is it okay for the bad guys to die? Is that ever something we would ever rejoice over? We noted, Sophie, that God says no. No, we don't rejoice, even over the deaths of the people who've been the oppressor. And perhaps in more generally, we need to see it less as black and white and see the humanity and have compassion and try to seek understanding about the people who've been in the role of the oppressor. I want to connect all of that to where we are right now, in our own place, in our own time, this particular weekend especially. Because here we are on Martin Luther King weekend, and I want to connect your words to this moment. So there's an interesting passage that happens right before the people cross the sea, where the people cry. Pharaoh's army is coming, bearing down on the people. They're standing wedged between the sea and the army, and they become afraid. And they cry out to God. And then immediately after crying out to God, they do what you talked about, Sophie, they complain. And they say to Moses, was it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die here? And then what happens next is that God says to Moses, why are you, Moses, crying out to me? Tell the people to go forward into the sea. So the commentators are confused because Moses didn't actually cry out. Why is God saying to Moses, why did you cry out? And what is the crying out that's being referred to, and what exactly is going on here? And Ramban, Nachmanides, a Spanish rabbi of the 13th century, says that actually what might be happening here in this complicated set of events is that Moses does actually cry out to God, and Moses' cry is not the same as the cry of the people. That when the people cry out, they're crying out in fear. They then get into conspiracy thinking because they're so panicked. And they think, well, wait a second, Pharaoh's coming now. And we thought that God had liberated us. But then Pharaoh wouldn't be coming if God had liberated us, so this must all be a mistake. Maybe God was just punishing the Egyptians, and God actually was never about our freedom, just about punishing the Egyptians. And maybe Moses took us out of Egypt to become our ruler instead of Pharaoh. And their fear got them thinking in all kinds of convoluted ways about what was happening, and they started to have conspiracy theories. Now, we can certainly relate to that in our own society today, where people are afraid about the unknown, the many unknowns of our time. Right? I could list them out, there's so many. Pandemic, climate change, global migration, and changing demographics in this country, right? And so there's lots of panic and there's lots of conspiracy theories happening. And so Moses, Ramban is saying, what God is responding to is Moses saying to God, these people are out of control. They're actually making things up right now, and they might not even listen to me when I tell them to cross the sea. What am I supposed to do with these people? And what God says to Moses, Sforno, another medieval commentator, says what God says to Moses is, don't doubt them. You think that they're just being rebellious and sarcastic and so out of control. Actually, they're just afraid. They're just afraid. Tell them it's okay to go forward. And Moses says back to them, don't be afraid. And then Moses lifts up his arm and the sea splits and the people walk forward. And I hear this passage very much speaking to what you're talking about and also this moment. The way that when we're afraid, we panic and often are not our best selves. And the way that we ought to have faith in people even when they're afraid. Teach them to calm down and teach them to move forward. So how does that all connect to this moment? Well, here we are. It's Martin Luther King weekend. And the big debate in Washington is whether people should have the right to vote in America. It's kind of amazing that that's the conversation that we're having. Why are we having that conversation? Because there are a lot of people in this country who are afraid. They're really afraid that things are changing in a way that they're going to lose their power. And this brings us to, Sophie, your call that we should try to understand the people who we might think are on the wrong side of history. Right? The Egyptians were on the wrong side of history in this story, right? And here we have in our country people who are saying we shouldn't teach about the history of slavery and racism in this country. We shouldn't allow it being taught in the schools. People saying we shouldn't allow people to be able to vote because, well, there's this conspiracy theory that there's all this voter fraud, which is just not true. And there's the thought that an election was stolen, which we know it was just not true. And so it's clear people are afraid. Now, having compassion for the Egyptians in this story doesn't mean that the Israelites shouldn't become free. Of course the Israelites have to become free. Of course slavery has to end. And actually, the liberation process isn't only for the Israelites, it's also for the Egyptians. Because it is a trap to be in the position of the oppressor. It's actually not healthy and whole to be in the position of the oppressor. And when liberation happens and the oppressed go free, that's actually good for the oppressors as well. But they're panicked and they're afraid in our moment. What is it going to look like to lose power? What is it going to look like to share power? Am I going to then be treated the way that we've been treating Black people in this country all this time? Am I going to be subject to violence? Am I going to lose what I have? Is my humanity not going to be held in its full beauty and significance? Am I going to be dehumanized in the ways that Black people have been dehumanized in this country? So we see white people, not all, but some white people in this country, maybe many, afraid. And we need to, in this moment, have compassion for that experience of the unknown. Because our country is changing, and it's going to be a majority of people of color. And that's terrifying for white people who've held the reins of power all this time. And it's underneath all of the events we see happening in our time right now in our country. And so, we have to have compassion for that experience, not just demonize and wish the downfall, but soften to that fear. Dr. King said, famously, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Now, loving and having compassion for people who are being hateful doesn't mean we give permission for hate, doesn't mean we give permission for voter suppression, doesn't mean we give permission for violence, doesn't mean we give permission for racism, doesn't mean any of that. It just means we don't hate or make them the enemy. And we keep crossing the sea. Now, that's the idea, is that we're still crossing the sea, right? The Emancipation Proclamation might have been in 1863, but the process of liberation is not over in this country. And the 1964 Civil Rights Act might have been many, many years ago, but we still don't have equal and civil rights in this country. The Voting Rights Act might have been in 1965, but obviously we still don't have universal guarantee of voting rights. We are still crossing the sea. We don't slow down one bit, we keep crossing. We don't compromise on any of those principles one bit, we keep crossing. We keep crossing. But while we cross, and the Egyptians are drowning, we don't rejoice. We don't turn the tables. We have compassion for the Egyptians. By the way, in many cases, it's us in this story. Right? We have compassion for the ones with power, for the fear of what's the unknown, what's coming next, what's the wilderness going to be like? Am I still going to be okay? Is my family going to be okay? Are my children going to be okay? Is there going to be safety for me? Am I going to have what I need? We have compassion for all of those fears as we keep walking across the sea. So this particular weekend, Dr. King's family has asked everyone, if you're going to celebrate Dr. King's memory, you have got to stand up for voting rights this weekend. Congress is debating it this weekend. And we just happen in this congregation to count the Senate Majority Leader as one of our members. Senator Chuck Schumer is a member of this congregation. And so the way that we as a congregation are going to be standing up for voting rights this weekend is we're writing him a letter as a community saying, we know that you are dedicated to voting rights. You have made it clear. We see you fighting for it. We have your back. As the people who sit next to you here on High Holy Days, as the people who are your neighbors and your friends, we are with you. We believe in you. Keep fighting. We have your back. Now that letter came out to the membership, I think yesterday or the day before. We're going to send it to him tonight after Shabbat. If you have a chance before 8 o'clock to get on that link and put your name on there, we've already got hundreds and hundreds of our members signed the letter. It's going to go to him tonight to just give him that extra feeling of push from us, saying we are with you. Because we are still crossing that sea. We have not arrived. We're not even close to having arrived. We are crossing that sea. And the last thing I'll say, because I just called us the Egyptians, and that may be upsetting for people, I just want to say, the people who crossed the sea were not just Israelites. You might not know this. But it was a mixed multitude. It was a whole mix of people, including some Egyptians, crossed the sea with them. People held hands across their differences, and they marched because they were invested in freedom. And they knew they had to march. They couldn't just be passive. They had to actually march to get to the other side. We are still crossing the sea. Let's cross together. Shabbat shalom. We're going to return the Torahs to the Ark now. I'm going to invite Sophie and Charlotte to join me so I can give them a blessing. We ask everyone to please rise.
Page 374.
Amen.
586 at the bottom. Aleinu L'Shabbat.
You may be seated. We always conclude by bringing our thoughts to the people we love who are no longer here. We end with memory. And so I want to invite you, if you are in the first week since the death of someone you love, if you're in Shiva, I want to invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. And if you're on Zoom, you can write that person's name into the chat. And if you're in Shloshim, the first 30 days since the death of someone you love, I invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. And if you're in Shana, in the first year since the death of someone you love, I invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. You can stay standing, everyone will join you soon. And I'm remembering my father, Eli Timona. And if this is a yahrzeit for you, an anniversary of a death, I invite you to rise and tell us who you're remembering. We all rise in company with the mourners in our midst. We remember these recent losses in our congregational community. Sheldon Dollinger, father of Marna Dollinger, father-in-law of Stephen Gold, grandfather of Michaela and Kevin. Rosalie Lovett, our member and wife of Bruce Lovett, and mother of Sam and Sarah, grandmother of Russell and Patrick and Nathan. Michael Sabin, father of Jessica Corner, father-in-law of Ari Corner, grandfather of Stella and Maxton and Milo. Joel Kielsen, father of John Kielsen, father-in-law of Becca Felsenthal, grandfather of Isaac and Judah. Paul Michael Davidson, father of Karen Schlossberg, and grandfather Harry and Jonathan Schlossberg. And these yahrzeits, Mary Berger, Shirley Bernay, Lila Bernstein, Irving Blaustein, Betty Brenner Golem, Michael Braudo, Annie Brown, Lillian Cohen, Bernard Dowman, Darcy Davis, Rebecca Edson, Anna Els, Anna Ice, Ursula Earlbaum, Anna Frankel, Sylvia Wolfson-Fried, Anna Gartenberg, Florence Gernsheimer, Samuel Gilson, Celia Gleiberman, Abraham Noah Glick, Elias Goldberg, Fanny Goldstein, Shelley Gottheim, Hermia Gould, Sheila Green, Miriam Greenberg, Milton Hamburger, Harry Harris, Miriam Heimberger, Paul Hess, Caroline Hirsch, Irving Hurwitz, Beatrice Imberman, Francis Jaffe, Bernard Kahn, William Keppelmaster, Isidore Kaufman, Brian Kendall, Abraham Kriegel, Jeanette Levin, Judith Levitt, Philip Lustig, Nuna Marciano, Frederick May, Pauline May, Esther Mendelson, Claudia Mori, Miriam Moskowitz, Sheila Muehlbauer, Daniel Newman, Betsy Nias, Madeline Paul, Ruth Louise Rassner, Louis Reibstein, Phyllis Roberts, Lester Rosen, Lena Rubin, Norman Runsdorf, John Saladino, Samuel Sanders, Martin Shear, Rosa Shea, Ray Schindler, George Schoenfeld, Nancy Schwartz-Sternoff, Lila Silverstein, Lila Solomon, Oscar Spatz, Phyllis Sussman, Adina Talby Goodman, Theodore Tannenhaus, Philip Tesser, Frederick Terman, Yehuda Vardy, Florence Cicely Weiner, Morris Wolberg, Anthony Yokel, Walter Yokel. We say, holding them all together, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be an everlasting blessing. As we turn to the words of the Mourners' Kaddish on page 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich machuteh. V'chayechon of yomechon of chayed chol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agalau v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach le'alam u'lamei al-maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal Shmei Kudisha Bruchu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiran be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom v'brama. V'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yoshvei Tevel v'imru. Amen. May the one who makes peace make peace for all who mourn. And we say together, Amen.
Oseh shalom v'brama. V'yaseh shalom aleinu.